All right. Hello. Welcome to another class at the East Kingdom Herald University. This is Armory 201 using the complex search form to check Armory conflicts, probably the class that's been most demanded in the series. I'm Yehuda ben Moshe, East Kingdom's Elmet Herald, and we're going to get started. Let me put up the image, and nope, that's not what I wanted to do. Show start. Okay. All right, excellent. You should have what I need on the screen. Okay, so that's the information I just said. Now it's in printed form. Unlike in most of the classes, we're going to be flipping screens a lot. In this one, it's not just going to be constant PowerPoint. Instead, we're going to be bouncing between this and a browser to do the searches live. So I recommend you have a another window open with a browser that you can follow along. You may want a couple of tabs because we're going to be using a few things. Can everyone see the PowerPoint presentation?
Yes.
So the prerequisites for the class is a really thorough understanding of the conflict rules. And you should also be able to conflict check with the ordinary index. That's the material covered in Armory 103 and 104 and in SINA section A5. So I recommend being familiar with those before watching this video. Obviously, if you're here live, it's too late for that. So, a quick review. If you remember, we're always looking for SCs, substantial changes first, before we start counting DCs, and because any one SC will clear the device completely. And the SCs are type, number, arrangement, posture, orientation, and adding or removing a primary charge group, which basically makes something either field primary or not, which is why it's in parentheses. Any two DCs will clear the device completely, and you get DCs for field, but just one for the field. For adding or removing any charge group, tincture within a charge group, which includes lines of division, type of charge, number of charges, arrangement, posture, orientation. So those are the things we can get DCs for. So where do we find all this? As you guys know by now, all SCA registered Armory and names are in the database known as the Ordinary and Armorial. It's at onda.sca.org. I tend to call it OANDA. There's a bunch of different ways there to search, and the method we're talking about today is the complex search form. So a note of caution. There's a blazon pattern search form. Do not use it for conflict checking. You will miss conflicts if you try to check with it. It's a simple text search, so consider trying to do a conflict search on something on a device that has a dog in it. You will need to also check for Talbot, and for Wolf, and for Greyhound, and for Fox, and for 100 other things. So the odds that you will miss a synonym of something are pretty low. I actually sat there the other day because I had a conversation with someone and tried to come up with something that doesn't have synonyms that should work, and the only thing I can come up with is a bend, because the diminutive is bendlets, so searching for the word bend will still get you the bendlets probably. So don't use it. It has uses, and we'll see why we use the blazon pattern form, but not for conflict checking directly. The only two ways to check for conflict are the ordinary index and the complex search form. Those are the only two methods that will give you good results. So the complex search form is really just a way to run a bunch of searches at once. And you can do different types of searches, but we will be using only what's called the Armory Description type of search. So if we flip over to the complex search form, you can see it says here Armory Description, but if we click the drop button, we can do a name pattern search, a record type search, blazon pattern, broad name, I honestly have no idea what a record type is. I've never done it. But a blazon pattern search is just like the text search we just discussed. You can also search for names this way. For our purposes, we're just dealing with the Armory description field. When it's properly used, the complex search form will give you exactly the same results as the ordinary index. You should get all actual conflicts, and you should be able to eliminate all non-conflicts. The difference is that the complex form is a lot faster. There's a lot less to check by hand. And what that means is if by the end of this and after some playing around, you're just saying, you know what, I'm just not getting it. I don't like this complex search form. It doesn't make sense to me. Don't worry about it. Just use the ordinary index. You're not going to get your searches wrong. It's just going to take longer. And I know many excellent heralds that just don't like the complex form. They don't use the complex form. They do it the other way, and that's fine. It's only a question of efficiency. So every every Armory entry in the ONA is coded using a system of Armory descriptions, and that's what we're going to rely on. So an Armory description has two parts. It has a category, and then it has 0 or more features. Most have features, some don't. I'm getting really bad feedback from somebody. I think, Solvig, it may be from you. You may want to mute your mic if you're not actively talking.
Let's see if that'll fix it.
Okay. Here's an example. Cat, :3, primary, rampant to dexter, or. In this case, cat is our category, and all those other things separated by colons are the features. Categories are written in all capital letters. Features are written in all lowercase letters. This has nothing to do with how you write them in blazon. So if you look up here, you can see that or is lowercase because it's a feature, even though we capitalize it in blazon normally. The good news is, actually, let me back up for a sec. The good news is it used to be that you had to write it that way or it would not work. One of the things that got fixed at my request is that's no longer true. If I write something like cat 3 primary using the wrong capitalization, up until about a year and a half ago, this would cause an error. Now, maybe even less than a year and a half ago, now when you hit search, it just reformats it. Magic.
I love it.
Yeah. So, not all entries in the ONA are fully coded. Everything has categories, but not all features are fully entered. As you will see later on, that doesn't really matter. Generally speaking, more recent registrations are more likely to be fully coded. There's older registrations are being recoded by Merciless Herald, and it's just taking time. Items that are not fully coded, you'll sometimes see them show up unexpectedly, but you're not going to miss a conflict because of it. You're just going to have, occasionally you'll be doing a search, something pops up, and you go, why in the world did that come up? My search should have eliminated that. It's because it wasn't coded fully. And we'll see why that works that way in a bit. So, how do we see examples of the coding? The easiest way is to perform a blazon pattern search and set Armory descriptions to enabled. Remember, we're not conflict checking with it. We're just looking at the blazon pattern. So let's take a look at that. If we go to a blazon pattern search form and search for, let's say, dog, except we have Talbot. We'll search for Talbot. And Armory descriptions down here is set to enabled. And we will see a bunch of coding. We will see everything that uses the word Talbot and all of the coding for it. And we can see that Talbot is coded as dog, :1, a bunch of other stuff, and we'll get to what all that means. But this is what the Armory descriptions look like in the wild.
I've gotten to where I run the Armory description, a tab with the Armory descriptions, and I do the manual search and click on the titles, like where it would say bird or and
Yep.
such. I
Yeah,
click on that and make it and let it pop up the
Yeah, there's actually a search form that is rarely used on purpose, but it's there, called the Armory Description search form, where you can enter one of these descriptions, and if you click on any one of them, it'll just take you to that with that search form. So this will show us everything that matches that. All right, continuing. So there's a critically important file called my.cat. All of the codes, all of these features, documents, etc., are defined in my.cat, and there's the URL for it, and we'll take a look at it in a moment. Some computers have trouble displaying this file. If yours doesn't, what you can do is just save it and then rename it to a .txt file, like my.txt or whatever, and then open it in a text editor, Notepad, Word, whatever. This is an automatically generated file, and it shows all of the categories, all of the features, and how they relate to each other. And that's actually one of the key things in my.cat. What it does not show you is how they're used. So it's made up of three main sections. The first section is features, the second section is categories, and the third section is cross-references. And we're going to discuss them in reverse order. So the cross-references are the bottom part of the file, and they're actually the same thing as the CX entries in the ordinary index. If you remember this from using the index, right? You go, let's say we're looking for a yak, okay, because our client wants a yak on their device. So we go to Y and go to yak, and yak tells us C beast-bull. That's a cross-reference. Yes, the client is wrong for wanting a yak. However, they still want a yak. So that's a cross-reference. And here's what it looks like in the what cross-references look like in my.cat. This is the my.cat. And if we go to the very bottom, these are all cross-references. And you can see, for example, here it says plant-flower, C flower, plant-fruit, C fruit. So one of the ways to find codes that we want is to do a search in this file. Control F on most PCs, probably something else on a Mac, and look for your text. Let's take a look at our yak example. We will go to this, hit Control F, and search for yak, and it'll tell us C beast-bull. And so we know we need to look in this file under beast-bull. Okay, we should now search for beast, bull to find the actual category. What the heck did it just do? Okay, I have an animation screwed up. The middle section, the next section up, is what's called categories. Okay, categories are over here. Okay, and categories show us how the Armory description is coded. Remember, they're always capitalized, and if we continue our example from above, if we then search for beast, bull, we will find this line. Beast, bull. That's a head. Hey, don't miss a space because it'll screw up. Okay, beast, bull, and then there's a vertical type symbol, which is the thing that's over your backspace key, and then it says in capital letters beast, bull, and bison. That capital text there is our actual code. That's our category coding. And so now, if we're trying to conflict check a yak, we would take this beast, bull, and bison and stick that into our complex search form. So that's how we use the cross-references and then into the categories. So the category will always have a lowercase plain English term, followed by a pipe symbol, followed by the all-capital category code. All right, features. Features are everything else that you can say about a charge. Its color, its number, its position, its occasionally its arrangement, its posture. And they're organized into feature groups. Now, the only place you will see the feature groups are in my.cat. You will not see them when you do a blazon pattern search form. You will not see them when you do an Armory description form. You will only see them in my.cat. And it pays to kind of learn the most common ones or to look them up as needed, because they are used internally by the system as part of the searches. Okay, because the system will only compare features to other features in the same group. So if you have a group called posture, which includes things like rampant and statant and such, it will only match other features in that posture group. Features always start with a pipe character, then you have the feature group, then a colon, and then the feature name. So this is from the feature section. It says that the group is posture and the feature is passant. Features can also include other features, and it looks like this: posture colon passant to dexter less than passant. What this means is that if you search for passant, it will also match. It'll match passant, but it'll also match passant to dexter. Okay, and here's the my.cat section on features, which is the very top, and you can see there's a whole. Here's bird postures. It happens to be. Okay, and you have a whole bunch of bird postures and a whole lot of, what matches to what. And generally speaking, this is based on precedent. So, for example, where is it? Something like migrant to chief, bird posture migrant to chief will also match displayed. Or rather, displayed will match to migrant to chief, because precedent says that.
So basically, anything after the greater than sign on my.cat would be what it actually matches to?
Well, it'll match to itself. So let's look at this example. If I have something coded as passant to dexter, and I search for something for passant to dexter, it will match. But if I have something coded to passant to dexter and I search for just passant, it'll still match. Okay, so it's both. Now here's an important point about this. These are not subsets. So if you have something like pipe number colon 4, which matches to which will also match to 4 or fewer, it'll also match 4 or more. It'll also match 2 or more. That doesn't mean that 4 or more matches 2 or more, or 4 or fewer matches 2 or more. It's only, this means that if you search for 2 or more, it'll get a hit against 4. If you search for 4 or more, it'll get a hit against 4. If you search for 4 or fewer, it'll get hit against 4. It doesn't mean that that these here have any relationship between them. It's not chain. Another way to look at it is this describes what will match the leftmost item. So you can almost kind of think like the very first item, the straight 4, is underlined, right? And it's underlined, and this is telling us, okay, here's all the things that will match to that underlined character. It tells us nothing about the relationship of the separate items, of the subsequent items. All right. So how does all this matching work? The complex search form tries to match each line of the search to the description of the registered armory. Now, it's important that to note it doesn't actually look for a match. What it looks for is a mismatch. And that's a really important thing to understand, and you will see why in a minute. But keep that thought in the back of your head. It only tells you when something doesn't match, not when something does match. So consider you have a registered item, ghouls, a lion, or. Okay, someone registered this, in 1973. Or it was more likely ghouls, a lion, or is a important non-SCA heraldry of some sort. This is what the lion portion of it might be coded as. It would say cat, because the category for all felines is cat. Or, which is a feature, it's the color. 1, there's just one lion. SPA, which means single primary alone on the field. And rampant to dexter is the posture. And each of these belongs to a category, to a feature group. Or it's part of the group called tincture, 1 is part of number, SPA is part of group, rampant to dexter is part of posture. So remember this, right? Remember that this is what's coded. Cat or 1 SPA rampant to dexter. Now suppose we're trying to conflict check vert a lion argent. Okay? So we might try a search. Cat 1. We're trying really simple. All we're saying is we have 1 cat in it. We're not going to say anything more about the cat. What will that mean? How will it process that? So first it checks that the category is present. Is there a cat? Yep, sure enough, there's a cat. Let's compare the cat lines. It then notices that we're looking for the feature 1, and that the feature 1 is in the number group. It then checks the register if the registered item has a feature in the number group on the cat line. It does, right? We saw that over here. We have 1, a feature in the number group. So it checks if the features match. They do, so this search will return a match. Okay? Is everybody with me so far?
Yeah.
Yep.
If there's issues here, you're not going to get the next couple of slides, and this is probably some of the most important stuff in the class.
Does it matter when you're typing them into the search boxes? Does it matter what order the features are in?
No. No, because it doesn't look for them in any particular order. It looks what group they're in. So back here, it could be cat or 1 SPA rampant to dexter, or it could be cat SPA 1 rampant to dexter, or doesn't matter. Same thing. Order is irrelevant. All right. So we talked about cat 1. Now suppose we'd search for cat argent, because we have a white argent in our example, right? It'll do much the same thing. It checks that the category is present. It is. It checks argent in the tincture group. Next, it checks that the registered item has a feature in the tincture group. It does. And finally, it checks if the features match. They don't. So this is a mismatch. The program will tell us this is a mismatch. But take a look at this. Suppose we screw up and do it and make a typo. Instead of argent, I typed in argent. Oops. Right? It happens all the time. What will the system do? Is this going to cause you to miss conflicts? Well, first it checks that the category is present. It is. It then notices that the feature is argent, which doesn't belong to any feature group, right? Because I mistyped it, and it's not in any of the. It's not in a feature group. Since it's not in a feature group, it's just going to ignore it. Remember what I said, that the system looks for mismatches, not matches? This will return a match. Okay? So if I accidentally search for cat argent, what's going to happen is, what am I trying to accomplish by searching for cat argent? I'm trying to eliminate all the cats that are yellow and red and blue and purple. Because I screwed it up, it'll just give me all of those cats. It won't eliminate the non-white cats, which means I'll have more hand checking to do. But I'm not going to miss a conflict because of this. Just waste time. All right, now here's another one. Suppose we're trying to check, we're still on vertiline argent, and we make another error, and we search for cat nayant. Now, nayant is a perfectly valid feature. It's just not found on lions, right? It's a fish position, or bird, for the duck fans in the audience.
Quack.
So first it checks for the category. The category is there. It notices that the feature is nayant, which belongs to the fish posture group, which is different from, and we can talk about bird nayant at the end during Q&A, because it's one of the tricky moments. It knows nayant is in the fish posture group, so it checks if the registered item has a feature in the fish posture group. It doesn't. So the group isn't present, the feature is ignored. This will return a match, because the system looks for mismatches, not matches. Right? This is not a mismatch, it's just failed to match. Not the same thing. Does this make sense to everybody? Why this will be a match? Yep. All right. Now, we're still on our vertiline argent, but here's a problem. That old item, that Ghoul's lion ore, is really old. It's not fully indexed. Instead, it's just indexed as cat. No one ever filled in the the features. It's all that's in this database is the category. So what happens next? We try to search cat argent, which is a correct search, right? It checks if the category is present. It is. It notices that argent is in the tincture group. It checks if the registered item has a feature in the tincture group. It doesn't, because there's no features at all. That group isn't present, so this feature is ignored, and we get a match. What does that mean? That means that entry that just says cat by itself will come up in every single search for any felines. So you have this carefully crafted entry where you're searching for 3 yellow cats, that are all statant, and suddenly here's this yellow lion all by its lonesome. You're going, why the heck did it show up in my search? And the answer is because it's not fully indexed. Because the system would rather give you an extra item for you to hand check than to accidentally leave out something that might be a conflict. All right? Everyone good on this?
Yep.
All right. So we get a mismatch only when the system is sure that there's no match. Otherwise, the system gives you a match. So where do you find all these codes? And we've kind of alluded to all this already. There's the category and feature codes are hugely voluminous. No one remembers all of them. Well, maybe Morsalis does, but most people don't. So how do you know what to look for? Well, there's 2 ways. The first is you go to my.cat and you search in it. You use Control F and you find the cross references or you find the features, and there they are. That's not how I do it. That's the way I was taught to do it. That's the way some people teach to do it. That's not what I do in my practice. What I do is I use the blazon pattern search form. I enabled Armory Descriptions, and then I just search for what I'm looking for. So let's take because I know Purple is currently working with some Nayant ducks. Let's use that as an example. I know Nayant is a fish posture. But Nayant could also be a bird posture, right, for a duck or a swan or something. And I don't know how the heck that's blazoned, that's coded. So I'm going to go to the blazon pattern search form, and I'm going to type in duck Nayant. Let's see. It might not, because it might not be spelled that way. And look at that. And to begin, Bereniov. And we find a row for bird, R1, argent, bird Nayant to sinister. So if you're searching for a bird in a Nayant posture, you don't search for Nayant, you search for bird space Nayant. Okay, I didn't know that. I mean, I knew it, but I wouldn't have other than the fact that I was preparing for this class. But that's how I find it. And what this does is this shows you how the features work in the wild. Like this is how all this coding looks in reality. What this doesn't give you is those feature groups and relationships between feature groups. The little less than signs and such. That you can only find in here. But most of them you can kind of figure out. Most things, if there's bird Nayant to sinister, I can be reasonably sure that I can also just type in bird Nayant, which will match either sinister or dexter. Just remember, don't conflict search with the blazon pattern search form. Can I say that enough times? All right, so search for what you're looking for, read the coding, and then use the coding in the complex form. So that's how I find the codes. All right, so how do we use the actual form? Complex form has 10 lines into which the searches can be entered, and each line can be assigned a weight and can be assigned the type of search. So we have 10 lines, used to be 5. There's a weight, which is by default is 1, and there's a method, which by default is Armory Descriptions. Those default settings are exactly what we want. Don't change them unless you really know what you're doing. And if you're taking this class, you probably don't know enough to mess with them. All right. Now, and this is the other change to the form that I kind of caused. If you leave a line blank, it's just going to ignore it. It used to be that you had to, if you didn't want to use all the lines, you had to delete this and do that, or it would give you errors. No more. You know, this here will work just fine. It'll just say, okay, line 1 is good, and we're just going to ignore lines 2 through 10. Okay, makes it easier. You don't have to sit there and turn them on and off as needed. So when the search is run, each line is assigned a value equal to the weight of that line if the search matches, or 0 if it's a mismatch. So if we use 5 lines and all 5 lines match, the maximum score will be 5. If 3 of the 5 lines match, the maximum score will be 3. And that's important, because what we're trying to do is have each line be worth exactly 1 DC. That way, if the line doesn't match, it means we have a DC. If the line does match, it can mean several things. It can mean that there isn't a DC, or that the system couldn't tell for sure. Okay, so in this way, we have to, there's a little bit of algebra. I promise you this is all there is. If the maximum possible score that you can get is n, the number of lines that you used is n, then you can ignore any results with a score of n minus 2 or less. Why? Because each of those score points is worth a DC. So if n is 5, if your maximum score is 5, then anything that's a 3 or has at least 2 DCs that the system found, you're done. If it has a score of 2, it's got 3 DCs. If it's got a score of 1, it's got 4 DCs. So you only need to check n and n minus 1. Okay, so any results with that n or n minus 1 have to be hand-checked. They might be conflicts. They might be clear but just not properly indexed. Or there might be DCs for things that don't code well. Arrangement does not code well. There's some coding for arrangement in the system. I recommend against using it. That's something to hand check. Arrangement is just too weird for the system to work. Arrangement, position, all those things. In Fess and Pale, in Canton, 2 and 1. The coding for that does not work right, and is mostly not there. So how do you construct the search? First thing you do is, just like when you're searching with index, identify all the charge groups, and including all of the details for those charge groups that are worth DCs. Now, you use one line to code the field. Anyone know why we use one line? Oh, the answer's right there. Never mind. Okay, we use one line to code the field because you can only ever get 1 DC for the field. So we don't want the field to ever give us more than 1 possible mismatch. For the primary charge group, we use as many lines as possible because we want to be able to generate as many potential DCs as possible. So we blazon everything there is about that primary group. We code the number, the color, the posture, the whatever you can come up with. For all other charge groups, we use 1 line per charge group, secondary, tertiary, and the reason for that is that we can get multiple DCs for it. So it's tempting to use multiple lines. The problem is, if you remove the charge group entirely, it's only worth 1 DC. So if you have 2 lines coding a tertiary charge group, but that tertiary charge group is just missing, the system would give you 2 points in the score, which is incorrect. It's only worth 1. So let's take a look at an example. Somebody give me a blazon for this.
For pale, azure, and ghouls, a lion rampant, and a T4 indented, 3 escallops ghouls.
Good. For pale, azure, and ghouls, a lion and a chief indented, or 3 escallops ghouls. Now, tell me about the field. What's the field? What's everything you can tell me about the field?
For pale, azure, and ghouls.
Okay. It's azure and ghouls. Anything else someone can tell me about a field that's worth a DC?
The fact that it's got the lion?
The fact that it's what?
Got the lion.
Well, no, the lion's not part of a field. That's a charge. What about the field that could be different that's worth a DC?
The fact that it's a plain line.
Exactly. The line of division is a plain line, right? Could be jagged, could be wavy, could be something else. So it's per pale, azure, and ghouls, plain line. Tell me everything you can tell me about the lion. The primary charge, the lion.
Or rampant Dexter.
Yeah. What else? Anything worth a DC about the lion?
There's one of it.
There's one of it. Right? Lion, one, or rampant. How about secondary charge group? What's our secondary charge group?
There isn't one.
The chief.
Chief.
Well, the chief. Yeah.
Yeah, peripheral ordinaries are always secondaries. So what can you tell me about the chief?
Or indented.
Yeah.
And charged.
And charged, but charged is a funny thing that we will talk about later. So one or indented line. What about a tertiary charge group?
Scallops.
And what about the scallops?
3 ghouls.
And they're in their usual orientation.
Yeah, and they're in Fess, and so there's ghouls that are in Fess, because I suppose somebody could try to put them in another arrangement, and that would be worth a DC. It's unlikely. So how do we translate this to coding for the search for? Okay, so the field, the code for per pale is ppale. Don't ask me why. In fact, in general, if you go ahead and go, why the heck did they code it this way? The answer is, I don't know. Or really, the answer is, because this system was developed in the 1970s on a computer running Fortran, and we've been stuck with it ever since. So Azure is the first tincture. You know, we would blazon Azure before Ghoul, so it's Azure. The second tincture is blazoned as tilde and space ghouls. Okay, and then the last feature is PL, which stands for plain line. You can also spell out plain line, but I'm lazy. Okay, so Azure and ghouls is interesting. So let's take a look at Mycat for it. Let's search for Azure. So here we go. The feature group tincture has Azure, right? It's part of the tincture group. But there's also a group called tincture 2, and that always represents the second tincture. And there it would be tilde and space Azure. There's also a tincture 1 group, which we're not going to discuss right now because it's kind of an advanced topic. All right? So what the thing to remember is when you're blazoning, you always blazon. When you're coding, the first one, whichever one is first in blazon gets listed first, and then whichever one is second gets listed second. With one exception, which is not documented anywhere. It's one of those secret bits of lore. If you have a situation where it doesn't matter for conflict purposes which one is first and which one is second, then they go in alphabetical order. Again, don't ask me why. Consider Checky, Azure and Ghouls. Is there a difference between Checky, Azure and Ghouls, and Ghouls and Azure? No. So they would be blazoned Azure, tilde, and Ghouls, because Azure comes before Ghouls alphabetically, even if the actual device was Checky, Ghouls, and Azure. All right, so that's our field. Now we're going to use as many lines as possible for the lion. So we're going to say cat 1, because there's just one of it, primary. And for charges, you always want to tag them with what kind of charge they are, primary, secondary, tertiary, because we don't want to be comparing them across charge groups, right? We're not interested, you know, someone might have registered a device where there's a tertiary cat. We don't want to match that. We don't care, you know. We only compare groups to groups. So cat 1 primary, cat or primary, cat rampant to Dexter primary. Anything else we can say about this cat? Not really. Now for secondary and tertiary groups, we stick everything on one line. Chief or jagged is the feature that describes all of the complex lines in the jagged group. The jagged group is defined in Appendix M of SINA. 1, and it's secondary. Now, do we have to say secondary? Not really, because chiefs are always secondary. Do we have to say 1? No, because you can't have more than one chief. It doesn't hurt. And then escallop, there's 3 of them. They're ghouls and they're tertiary. Note that I do not in any way code infest, because that's just not coded in the system. So that would be my search. So let's try it. Per pale. Azure and plain line. Okay. Jet. S. What's our maximum possible score here?
6.
Okay, what can we ignore?
4 or less.
4 or less. Let's see what happens. We hit search. Note that it redoes the thing, punctuation, and we have 3 items with a score of 4. Those are the 3 we have to hand check. Azure, malady of 6 points, 2 DCs right there. Different field, and then there's the semi of mullets. Ghouls, a demi-line. We're done. A demi-line is a DC from a lion. It's a different field. Ghouls, a lion, and a chief infected, or 3 sons ghouls. Is that a conflict?
Yeah. Well, wait a minute.
No.
Posture for the lion and
You
the
get
sons.
There's one for the field. There's one for changing from scallops to sons, and I think there's actually also a DC between an indented line and an infected line. Okay, because the things in the jagged group get DCs against one another. So no, but that's by far the closest, right? Do we need to look at the 145 matching items with a score of 3?
Nope.
Nope.
Did we need to look at the 3 matching with a score of 4?
Nope.
No, I just looked at it because I felt like it. You know, because there were only 3. If I'd gotten 20 of them, I would have said, let's move on. So realistically, we don't have to hand check a single item. Now try doing this with the ordinary index. Where would we go? We always go with a primary charge group, right?
So first
So we
we'd
would
say
go to
lion.
lion, which tells us beast-cat, fine, 1 or rampant. Yeah. We've got 245 items we've got to take a look at. All right, which search is faster?
Complex.
Yeah, by a lot, right? You know, again, nothing. You will not be wrong if you use the ordinary, the index. It's just going to take a while. All right, let's take a look at another example. Some practice problems. Give me the blazon for that, somebody.
per bend, argent, and ore, a castle, ghouls, and chief ghouls.
Yeah. So, what do we know about the field?
It's per bend, argent, and ore.
And what else?
Plain
Plain
line.
line.
Plain line. Right. We have a single ghoul's tower, we have a single ghoul's chief, and it is plain line. So, how would we go about setting this up? So, per bend is p bend, argent and or plain line. Okay. Argent before or because with divided in half it matters.
Yep.
Castle. What can we say about the castle? There's 1 and it's primary. It's ghouls and it's primary. Anything else we can say about the castle? Not really. Chief. The chief is interesting. Ghouls, plain line. UNC stands for uncharged. And again, you can spell out uncharged. There is also a matching item charged, which you should almost never use, and we'll talk later about why you should not use charged. Okay, but uncharged, please use. Now, how many lines do we have here? What's our best possible score?
4.
4. Can we do any better? Is there anything else we can index? There's not. So this is a search that's going to use fewer lines, which means we may have more handwork to do. Because the more lines you can generate, the less work you have to do.
And you said UC's for uncharged, right?
Uncharged. You should be aware of is you don't have to use every single item. The more you use, the fewer results you will get, which is the goal. But sometimes you look at a device, you go, you know what? Nobody has this freaking thing. Let me just quickly put in the major items and see if there's anything even close. And maybe I'll only get 2 results anyway. If I get 30, then I'll go back and refine it. Okay? So, what's our maximum score?
4,
What scores do we need to check?
2,
3 and
3 and
4.
4.
3 and 4.
And we get a score of 2.
45 items with a score of 2. Are we done?
Yep.
Yep.
We're done. It's clear. Anyone want it? It's a nice device. Yours for the low, low price of whatever your kingdom charges for submission. How about this one?
Argent
3 axes,
All right.
ghouls.
So what can we say about this thing?
Argent's the field primary. 3 axes, ghouls, 2 and 1.
They're pale-wise, and they're 2 chief, and they're 2 and 1, but unfortunately all that pale-wise, 2 chief, 2 and 1 isn't indexed. So all we can really... another one where I messed up. All we can really do say is Argent, Axe, 3, and Ghouls. Now notice that there's this G3PA thing. That's another one of those special terms. What that stands for is group of 3 primaries alone on the field. There's also G2PA, there's also SPA, single primary alone on the field. Alone on the field means there's nothing else. Tertiary charges are not on the field, they don't count. But primary, secondaries, and overall charges are on the field. There's also corresponding G3PNA, not alone, which you should not use unless you know what you're doing. But by all means, use the group 3 primary alone. It's one more thing. But use it on the same line as the 3. Because you don't want to, if you use it on 2 different lines and you're looking at something that's not 3, both lines are going to trigger. So let's take a look at a search for this. How many? What's our maximum possible score?
3.
What do we need to
3,
check?
which means we
3 and 2.
everything that gets
And
Yeah, we're gonna get a. This one's gonna require some handwork. Okay, we got no 3s, but we've got 10 2s. That's not too bad. Argent, A battle X schools. Now wait a minute. We said group of 3 primaries alone. Why is this battle X here? Okay, there's all these ravens as well. Why did this come up? I don't know. Let's take a look. If you go up here, you can turn on Armory Descriptions, just like we did with the Blazon Pattern Search Form. And when you start out doing this, you may want to do this because it'll help you see how the system is working. Here's that same guy. Ghoul X, 1, ghouls of 1. I don't know what the heck of 1 is. SPNA. So what lines in our search did it match? It matched Argent, and it matched Axe ghouls. Right? It didn't match X3, which is why we got a score of 2. But we've got to hand check it. We can't rule it out. Because we're coding for DCs, not SCs. Single battle X, it's clear. Single X, it's clear. A fastest ghouls, clear. A garb and in chief 2 X's fest-wise. Well, there's at least 1 DC for changing one of the X's to a garb, and their fest-wise has to center, so that's a DC for position. Argent, a Paul, that's our primary charge, it's clear. An Asian lady, slipper orchid, clear. I'm going fast. If you're not sure why something is clear, please stop me. Argent, impale a tree and clear. Impale a tree and in Saltier a Viking bearded axe and a hammer, clear. Argent, 3 axes ghouls, hafts crossed, impal, inverted, sable. Is that clear?
just barely.
Just barely, right? There's a DC for tincture and a DC for arrangement. Argent, 3 double-bitted X's in bend, ghouls within a bordure embattled sable. Okay, we actually have a substantial change for arrangement because in bend versus 2 and 1 is a substantial change, and then there's the bordure. Okay, in Paul is not worth an SC, it's only worth a DC. So, still clear. Anyone want 3 red X's? Free for the taking. Alright, that's the basics. Now let's look at some more complicated situations. So before we move on, anyone have any questions to this point? Because things are about to get a little more complicated. Alright. The bane of all conflict checking, split type charge groups. Okay, when you have a charge group that has 2 different types in the same group, you have to check them separately. If you try to check it as one search, you will miss conflicts. Now, there is an advanced technique for doing it with one search. We're not going to cover it today. Frankly, I don't understand it myself. If you're really curious, get good at the basic stuff first, and then ask Istvan. He's the one that uses it, and as I said, I don't really fully understand it. Okay, so let's take a look at this. What's our blazon?
Profess, argent and or, a fret, purpur, and a goose. Vert.
Yeah, almost.
Fret is
would
come
come
first.
That doesn't matter. Yeah, and or before argent. So that's our field. There's our primary charge group, though, contains both a purpur fret and a vert gout, right? Goot. So what's tempting to do is this: profess, plain line or an argent, fret 1 primary, fret purpur primary, goot 1 primary, goot vert primary. That's the tempting and incorrect search. Because consider this: what if there's a registered item, profess or an argent, a fret purpur and a fret vert? How many DCs does that have against our picture?
1,
1. How many lines will mismatch?
2.
2. Right? We would miss this search, this item, if we tried to search like this. Similarly, we would miss it if they were both gouts, whatever. Okay? Everyone clear why that you can't do it this way?
Yeah.
All right. So here's how you do it. You do one search based on the fret: profess, plain line, or an argent. Note that I say group of 2 primary alone, but I don't specify the number of frets because maybe there are 2 frets. And then I specify its color. So I do this search, and then I do that search. Again, I'm not specifying how many goods. I'm just specifying that the good is part of a 2-item group. Because if it's part of a 3-item group, then we have a substantial change no matter what type they are, right? Does this make sense? This is a pain in the neck. Because what happens
in this type of situation that you would actually split up the primary for the search pattern,
Yeah.
just to make it a little more clear.
Yeah, you have to. You have to search for one type and then for the other separately. Did I not? I may have missed the question in its detail. Does that answer it, or?
Oh, it answered.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's a pain in the neck because guess what? Both of these are small. We only have 3 lines in each search. Let's run these searches, and we'll see why it's a pain in the neck. So we have profess, plain line, or G2P fret purpur. What numbers do we need to check?
3 and 2.
3 and 2. Only 2 items, not a big deal. Or Traffly vert, a fret engrailed purpur. Clear. There's just there's a semi and the single fret. Or Freddy purpur on a gulp, a dexter gauntlet. No problem. Clear. Now we've got to do the other one, right?
I think there's one
And
T.
And don't ask me why it's spelled Goute in here, which is, wrong.
Yeah, that always messes me up.
88 items with a score of 1, nothing with 2 or 3, we're fine. No big deal. But imagine that was a lion and a wolf. How many items do you think we would hit?
Oy.
Several.
Oh, this was a wolf, right? Dog.
Yeah. Hmm.
2 items, it's not too bad. Now we've got to check the other one with cat. I'm ignoring the tincture for the moment. Actually, my one matching with score, it's less bad than I thought. Okay, but sometimes you just get, there's 20 on this side and 30 on the other, and you're sitting there going, God damn it, isn't there any way to do better? And unfortunately, no. You've got it. I mean, there's Istvan's advanced method, but short of that, you're just not. It's just becomes tedious. All right, fieldless badges. When something is fieldless, it gets a code NO for the field. Right? Just like we had PPAL and Profess and such. Don't use it. The reason you don't want to use it is because if you use no, you will get a mismatch against fielded devices, but it will give you a match against other fieldless badges, which is wrong. Right? It's got a DC against other fieldless badges. So simply skip describing the field, and now you only have to check the maximum score of N-1, because you have 1 DC for the field already in the bag. You only need to find things that have anything with 1 more DC from the complex search form is automatically clear. So you're only checking things that have the maximum score. So just leave that blank. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yes.
All right, field primary armory. I don't know of any good way to conflict check field primary armory this way. Don't know any. Just go to the ordinary and check field only and peripheral only categories by hand. They're not that big. They're alphabetical. You can kind of do it at a fairly good clip. Not well suited to complex search form. Again, there may be people out there that know how to do it. I don't. Some pitfalls to be aware of. So we talked about a pair of features, charged and uncharged. Uncharged is very useful. Use it a lot. Charged should be avoided. Consider this. We're searching or a lion sable on a chief ghouls, a sword argent. Right? And we label it as or. I'm ignoring the lion because the lion's not a part of it. So we label the chief as ghouls and charged. We label the sword as argent tertiary, 1 tertiary. What if there's a registered or a lion sable, a chief ghouls? How many mismatches will we get?
1 at least.
Will the first line match? Or?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Will chief ghouls charged match?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
No.
No,
This
'cause
chief
it's
is
not.
not charged.
Oh, right.
Right? So that charged will give us a mistype. And then there's no sword, so this won't charge. So how many DCs do we actually have? Just the 1 for removing the group, right?
Yep.
But our system would give us 2. We would not even look at this item, and we would miss a conflict. Okay? This is why the reason we don't use charged is because we want. Rosina is saying something. Someone did a field primary conflict check. If it was Istvan or Marie, then it's probably safe to use. If it was anyone else, I would be very skeptical of using complex search forms for field primary armory. Okay, so the point is that, remember we said that we want every line to have a separate DC. You don't want a relationship between them. You never want to be in a situation where the same DC triggers more than 1 line. So when you have something charged, you're usually blazoning the other, whatever it's charged with. The only exception to it, where I will use charged, is if the tertiaries are split type. Suppose I have, or a lion sable on a chief ghouls, a hedgehog between 2 roses argent. Well, to do it right, remember we said what we have to do for split type groups. We got to check it once with roses. We got to check it once with hedgehogs. Now, if I'm looking and going, you know what? I'd be really surprised if there was a lot of conflicts with this. I may not not code the tertiary charges at all, and instead say the chief is charged. So I would skip this second line. I would skip this second line entirely and leave the charged. And then, again, and if that returns me 5 items, great. If it returns me 200 items, then I'm going to go back and do it, in 2 separate searches with hedgehogs and roses. Make sense?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. A very similar situation is with not alone. So you have primary charges can be alone, SPA, single primary alone, group primary alone, group of 2 primary alone, and the equivalent NA, not alone. Again, alone, very useful. Not alone has the same pitfall as charged. Consider you're checking or a lion sable between 3 swords ghouls. And you label our cat, and we don't, obviously you'd have more lines for the lion. And you say sword, ghouls, 3 secondary, but you label that cat as sole primary, not alone. If there's a registered or a lion sable, which lines would mismatch?
The sword.
The sword would obviously mismatch. How about that second line, cat 1 SPNA? It would mismatch because this line is alone. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's the exact same problem as we just had. And again, I would use not alone with split type secondary groups and not code the secondaries at all. But it's one or the other. Either you're using not alone or you're coding the secondary. And usually coding the secondary will give you fewer results to hand check. All right. So, summary. Remember, 1 line for field, as many as possible for the primary, and 1 per group for all of the other groups. That's a really important formula, because I see people screwing this up a lot, either because they stick all the primary stuff on 1 line, which is not wrong, it's just not going to eliminate as many items. Or they use multiple lines for a secondary group or a tertiary group, and that is wrong, because you will miss conflicts that way. And for mixed groups, you've got to check both, avoid uncharged and not alone, and that's about it. Resources, the only other resource on using the complex search form is an article found at that address. You don't need to write it down. It'll be in the handout that will be on the web page. This is written by Marie, and both Marie and Istvan teach this class from that. I have, not everything I teach is word for word with that item, but I'll tell you this right now that I had this open when I was working on this class. There are a few points where Marie and I disagree on approaches. I think mine is better, and she thinks hers is better, and you can try both and make your own decisions. So, my usual final thoughts, if you've taken my classes before, you've seen this. Registerable versus authentic. Remember that a submission has to be registerable. It does not have to be authentic. We can encourage our clients to design period-looking armory, but we don't force them. If they're set on something that's registerable but not very authentic, you grumble about it on Baby Harold's Facebook group or SA Herald's, but you go ahead and process it. This is a customer service job, right? We're trying to help our clients. We're trying to help their registrations happen. Help your clients create things that they like that are registerable. When you're commenting, look for reasons to allow registration, not prohibit it. We really do want to improve our reputation and come off as helpful, not obstructionist. There's my contact info. You will know, if you've got handouts from the old classes, you will note the new stop that. You will note the new URL. The classes have finally been moved to the actual East Kingdom server instead of being on mine. The old server isn't being updated. So make a note of this new location, elmet.eastkingdom.org.
Have you changed the link on the STA, the Baby Heralds group?
I have asked it be changed, and I think it has been.
Okay, because I've been referring people to it.
Yeah. Well, and if you let me pull this back up. Actually, hold on a sec.
When I was at the new Elmet site earlier, it didn't have links for any of the old classes, like the handouts or the videos or anything.
Let's elmet.eastkingdom.org, and then you go to the East Kingdom Herald University, and there's the video links, and there's the handout links.
All right, maybe my computer is just having its little fits. Let me go and look, since it's afraid of you, and it'll obviously do what it's supposed to do now. EKHU. Oh, I see what it's doing. It's a really huge table, and even on my
I guess that may depend on
I
how
have
your
to
screen
scroll
displays.
over.
As you can see, it's not really huge on my screen, but I also have a very wide screen. So.
Okay. Scrolling I can do. Hey, cat. Hi. Nice to see you.
Yeah. So the old site is no longer being updated, and there's a disclaimer to that effect at the top. So yeah, if you're linking to people, please link them to the new site. All right. Questions?
It just seems like to me that everything on this is going to be like everything else, trial and error until we start getting the rhythm on it.
Yeah. There's a lot of trial and error. There's a lot of I encourage when you're first using it to turn on Armory Descriptions when you're doing the complex search form, and look and see and try to figure out, okay, why did this search come up? Maybe go down to the N-2, that first category that's not that you don't need to check, and don't hand check it, but take a look at the items and go, okay, why didn't these items come up? Where's my missing count? Why did this not match? Oh, there, it's this and that, and that'll help you figure out what works. And if you ever run into something, and go, wait a minute, that's a conflict. How did I miss it? Probably means you've done your search wrong. One very nice thing that you can do, and some of you are doing this already on Facebook and such, or on the mailing lists, is if you go up here and just cut and paste this link, it'll include your whole search.
Yes.
So if you're not sure, you can post on Facebook, you can post on SCA Herald, you can post on the EK Herald Ed, or whatever other lists or social media you use. Say, hey, I'm checking this device. Here's the blazon here, or here's the picture, and here's my search form. Is that right? Is that good? I love those posts. I frequently answer them. Others frequently answer them. Just be careful of who answers them, because you want to make sure you're taking advice from someone that actually knows what they're doing.
I usually give it about a good 5 to 10 posts, just so I get a collective of everybody's thought
Right.
before I.
And a lot of times I'll look at something and go, no, that's wrong. You're going to miss conflicts. Here's why. And occasionally that's fine, but here's how you can make it better so that you have less handwork to do.
Yeah.
Because this can be coded like that, perfectly legitimate coding, right?
It's not showing us what you're doing.
Yeah.
Oh,
No, I got
I turned
Still
off.
got your face.
Yeah. So hold on.
There we are.
So here's our last search, right? I can do that. Nothing wrong with that search. What's that search going to give me?
A lot.
Right. I'm getting 129 items matching 3, and probably another 300 matching 2. The search isn't wrong. It's just inefficient. Oh, one other thing I wanted to say. We talked about the fact that if you do a typo on a feature, it just will ignore it. It won't. You'll get more results, but you won't miss anything. If you do a typo on a category, like say I dropped the extra S,
It will let you know it.
it will let you know it, exactly. What you're going to get is right under results, it'll say error. PFAS is not a valid description. Right? Categories have to be correct, or it'll throw an error because it doesn't know what you're doing. Now it gives you results. Don't look at them because what it did is it said, okay, we'll ignore that line and just give you everything else. You don't want to do that. Go fix it. Yeah. Well, it's 500 because 500 is the maximum it'll show. The system will not give you more than 500. So right there, maximum numbers of items. And I don't think you can set it above 500. Let's find out.
Shock and surprise, cats are popular.
Yeah. Well, let's see what happens. No, it'll give you 1,000 if you really want. It's set to 500. If you're running into that limit, you're doing something wrong.
I would figure even a quarter of that you're running into some problem.
Yeah. The most you should generally be hand checking is like maybe 20 or 30 items.
Mm-hmm.
I think the most I've ever had was like 100, but that was for something like, Argent, a thing, ghouls. And, it was a thing that you couldn't even describe in detail. It was, like a sword, right? There's not much you can say about a sword other than there's one of it and what color it is, because, like, orientation doesn't match. So if I tried to do, Argent, by the way, is AR. Coding for plain tinctures, AR for Argent, GU for ghouls, first two letters for everything, except Vert, which is VT. So like Argent, Sword, 1 SPA, Sword, Ghoul, Prime.
Not screen sharing again.
Nothing else we can do on that. I'm not screen sharing again. Thank you. Right? Suppose you have Argent, a Sword, ghouls. That's it. There's nothing more we can say about this thing. And, there's a lot of swords. And I don't know what the number is. It'll 1 item matching 3, 27 item 2. That's not bad. That's 30 or so items, right? That you're not going to do any better than that, but you can hand check that. That's not a big deal. But I've had ones come up where, I had to do like 100. Or like a split group one where I had to do like 30 and 20. 30 on one side and 20 on the other. Those are big, Those are big and annoying. But most of the time, 20 or 30 is as much. I mean, this is as much as you should ever see. And ironically, this thing is totally clear.
Yeah, and if you ever have problems with the categories, like trying to remember what the categories are when you're checking the Armory Description search form, using that is your best friend.
Yeah. So here's a good question, teaching exercise. Right? We coded this Sword 1 SPA Argent Ghouls Primary. This item, this first Michael of Ravens Lake, matched with a score of 3, which means it matched every single line, right? How did that happen? Argent, a sword inverted ghouls between 4 sheafs of arrow and a base. How did that match SPA? Shouldn't be, right? It's not alone. And the answer is, it just was never fully coded, because the sword is 1 ghouls palewise, and there's nothing about group. Okay, so this is 1. If this had been indexed correctly, we would not have seen it up here, but it wasn't. So it wasn't, so it wasn't. Yes, he does have unnecessarily busy arms, but whatever.
Like you said before, the search prefers to give you something that you might manually kick out when it's not sure.
Now, fields are described in 2 ways, categorized. They're categorized with the first 2 letters, and they're also categorized using field : Argent. And you can use either one, but I recommend this one. And the reason I recommend this one is when you go to divided fields, this you can tack on things like the plain line or complex line. This you cannot. It's just not set up that way. Okay, so like, let's take a look at Profess. Profess, Azure, and Argent. So you can see there's field : Azure, Profess, Azure, Embattled, and Argent. So by using Profess, we can describe both tinctures and the complex line. Field only gives us some of them. And then sometimes it gives us weird versions of it, like tilde argent and tilde and azure. So just don't use the field category. All right. There's a lot of things that are weird. For example, fleur-de-lis FDL. Okay, that's good enough. A cross has two different things. If you type in cross, that'll give you cross the ordinary, like the throughout cross. If you want just a cross that's sitting on there, it's CRAC, crack. What the hell is CRAC? Turns out it's cross as a charge. All right. Who came up with that? I don't know. But these are the sort of things you just learn. If we go to Blazon pattern search form and we say cross Hamidi, right? Crack, cross as a charge,
Crack.
as opposed to cross, which would be a cross throughout as an ordinary. There's a lot of weird things like that. Here's one that
There's a cross comedy.
Here's one that bothers a lot of people. Let's say purple. No, that's not what I want to do. A Paul, right? The charge is Paul. Okay, makes sense, right? Matilda, your homework assignment now is to find out what a cross commenting looks like. So, Paul, nice logical thing, right? How about a Paul inverted? Because we get Pauls inverted occasionally. Paul star 7. Where the heck did star 7 come from? I don't know. That's the code for a Paul inverted. Paul star 7. There's also occasionally I'll see star 9. I don't remember what it's for. Weird stuff. Again, this was written in the 70s on a Fortran-based mainframe computer. When they had to save character spaces or something.
The star 9's probably chevrons inverted.
Maybe that may be it. Nope, that's also chevron star 7. There was a star 9 somewhere. So. Nope, Hamidi, not Plumity. So you get weird ones. So just looking at this stuff is helpful. You will learn. On the other hand, per chevron inverted is PCI, not PC star 7. PC is per chevron, PCI is per chevron inverted. You learn these as you do this a lot, and if you don't remember it, look it up. That's why when I'm when I'm conflict checking, this is what my tab setup looks like.
Star 9 is Solitaire.
Complex search form, Blazon pattern search form, Sina. Yes. You guys don't know this for crosses. I do. If you Google SCA crosses, the first thing you get is this thing, Coblade, which is back. It was down for a while. It is the single most useful thing on crosses. And so it's a little bit outdated, but I've not yet run into a problem. Mind you, he doesn't have Hamidi, or she. That's weird. Not so much for that.
Has Philfot, though.
Yes, which is not a permitted one, but so.
Did you mean cross Elmet?
None of these are correct Hamidi. No, that's not Hamidi. All right, now I can't find a picture of Hamidi.
Oh, there you go.
There it is. Okay.
So it's a cross that's sharpened at the bottom to be a vampire hunting stake.
Exactly. It's a incorrectly drawn Latin cross ficci. Because ficci would, Master Bruce says about ficci should look like a smooth taper, not a number 2 pencil. Hamidi is a number 2 pencil.
Yeah, when you said Hamidi and then I seen her say that it was a pointed cross, I was like, okay, that's Fitchy though.
Yeah. Yes. Latin cross with a pointy bottom. Yeah. Yes, because proper proper ficci like this is not proper ficci. See, it's got that number 2 pencil thing. Proper ficci would be more like
The red one.
well, the red one, that's a cross of St. James specifically, like this thing, like the middle one here. Kinda. It should be a long taper. This one over here. This is a good one. That's a crosslet ficci. Okay. So. Cross. Anyway, that's that. Any more questions?
No, practice makes perfect.
And it's going to take a lot of practice to catch up to really grasp this. I can already foresee.
Yeah. The big thing is you got to keep thinking in terms of, okay, don't overlap DCs on one hand, and try to get as many DCs as possible on the other. Right? You want each, if you're familiar with mathematical term orthogonal, you want each line to be orthogonal to the others. You want them to be completely independent of one another. So that there's no situation where a single DC's worth of change will trigger more than one line. So that's part 1, and part 2 is get as many DCs as you can. And again, remember that formula. 1 line for field, as many lines as possible for primary, 1 line each for all the other charge groups. Yes, DC's got to catch them all. All right, I'm going to stop the broadcast at this point. Thank you for watching the video and coming to the show.